my brother, Professor Allen. Professor Allen, what was Frederick Douglass's view on Pan-Africanism and going back to Africa? Because I know you're pretty thorough about that. Go ahead, brother.
Oh yes, sir. How y'all doing, room? What's going on, family? There's so much to say on this. First and foremost, I was professor of education at a historically black college in Memphis, Tennessee,
Hmm.
and I was sitting down at the lunch table with a history professor, full professor, who didn't have a PhD, and that caught my attention right away. But anyway, I asked him what's his curriculum at the school, and his curriculum was from he said Malana Karenga, who was a Pan Africanist, and it got my attention. Why? Because Pan Africanism has always been associated with oppish behavior.
Yeah.
Somebody earlier mentioned W. Du Bois, and what I wanted to comment on, or Brother Sulan did. I wanted to comment on W. Du Bois. The history, like Professor James Small says, history will erase the mystery. And if
Hmm.
you look back at Du Bois, he wanted to go to Harvard real bad and got rejected. And the second time around, he got accepted. He was the first black man to get a PhD from Harvard University. And at Harvard, he was imbued with that ideology of Pan Africanism. It's my opinion that that ideology was given to W. Du Bois to to destroy the black community. Why? Why? The why is important because before W. Du Bois, you had Booker T. Washington. Booker T. Washington's ideology was unity. It was called industrial education, which stated that basically every child, you can be whatever the hell you want to be, but every child needs a trade first. So
Right.
what Booker T. Washington's ideology did was give the black community a financial base. And then here comes W. Du Bois from Harvard with Pan Africanism and that talented 10th bullshit that
Hmm.
said that we need a leader. And we're still suffering. In conclusion, we're suffering under that talented 10th bullshit right now. Al Sharpton is talented 10th. On that, I land my plane.
There you go. Yes, indeed. That Boule class that's been a big nothing burger for us, and they've used that Boule class against us. You know, they've used that Boule class against us. The Rollins and people like that. That's been a problem. And that's why I always say, don't the dominant society. They're real big on creating leaders for us. That's why they always try to lie and try to make me the leader of some damn body. Because when you have a leader, you can attack that so-called leader as a proxy for attacking the community. You understand? That's why I get away from that black leader stuff. We don't need leaders. We just need a code. The code is the leader. Just stick by the code. Just have a code of conduct that's logical. When you move certain ways, is that going to be a constructive move? Everything is all about logic.
And when you any history of the migration of blacks from the South, it began in earnest after this speech. Because blacks suspected that something was going wrong. Now, white editorial writers made Booker T. Washington the leader of black America. They made him the leader of black America, declared that he was, and white philanthropy began to filter all the, not just for Tuskegee, the money that any black got for education had to come through Booker Washington. He was literally the dictator of black America. Now, I'm not so much against dictators if something good is being dictated. And sometime he dictated something good.
Welcome back to Breakdown Friday. Joseph Ward, Professor Carl Tone Jones, Patrick Irvin. We are here breaking down the conversation around black leaders being given to black America and being given to black America for the purposes of making sure that the white establishment is able to continue what they're doing, white supremacy is able to continue, and black people will be null and void or not a threat to white supremacy. Tariq and the gentleman in that conversation were talking about W.E.B. Du Bois's position versus Booker T. Washington's position. W.E.B. Du Bois' usage of Pan-Africanism and the talented 10th ideology in the class. And then it moved into Dr. John Henry Clark. It was one of the lectures that I played a couple months ago, maybe a month ago, about Dr. John Henry Clark giving his analysis on our leaders being given to us. And in this particular audio, he was talking about Booker T. Washington, but he also talked about W.E.B. Du Bois as well. So, and you heard Dr. Clark's stance on Booker T. Washington being given to Black America by white America and actually becoming a gatekeeper for Black America through white America being that proxy. He said it was some good and some bad. But overall, we're talking about our leaders and our leaders being given. But also, we have to talk about the followers who continue to follow the leaders, even after they are exposed, and especially nowadays, because Black America, of course, more study in PC, I'm sure he has more information on this, but from what I've been reading in, you're very knowledgeable on this stuff, man. You got it. You the dude in that, man. But we started reading Destruction of Black Civilization, and what we learned is a lot of stuff that's happening to us as far as from our oppressors is not new. Mm-hmm. What we have continued to do is fail to understand history. So, of course, that's where the breakdowns come in, so we can get further into this. So, hey, man, PC, while we on you, man, let's go ahead and get this thing right. Do it how we do it. So, what's your assessment on what the gentleman was talking about in the conversation with Tariq Nasheed and blending into what Dr. Clark is talking about? Our leaders being given to us, the quality of our leadership, but also the followers who continue to follow these leaders, even after they learn that these leaders don't have our best interest.
Well, I think that there's something to that in terms of our leaders being chosen, because you can't point to any other community and say, well, this is their leader.
Right.
You can't go to the Jewish community and say that this is their leader. You can't go to the Latino community. You can't go to the Arab community. You can't go to the white community. I mean, the leader of the white community happens to be sitting in the White House. So you really, the fact that this is a pointed way of creating, this is called playing from both sides, right? So your enemy chooses the person that they're going to appoint. They're going to provide resources to. They're going to put them in a position of authority, of assumed authority over a community that is dying for somebody to come save them. I mean, Black people have been indoctrinated to look for a savior, the savior's complex, expecting Christ to come through the cloud, through the clouds in the sky one day, and the fact that I totally agree with the fact that the concept of not allowing somebody on the outside to choose your leaders. And go further, we've always had this conversation, and this is one of the things we kind of go back and forth on. I don't believe in charismatic leadership, because if you have an appointed leader, all you have to do is cut the head off the snake, and the body will die. And we've seen that time and time again in the Black community, that if the leader professes or provides himself or is seen as a threat, even Booker T. Washington, was taken out, so they will snuff the head. They will cut the head off. Literally. 2 sanitation workers were sacrificed, pushed into the back of garbage trucks, and allowed to be murdered with the trash compactor within the trucks to lure Dr. King to Memphis, because Dr. King, according to them, went off script and was seen. And I think the interesting part about this is they allow for the leadership to be absorbed
by the followership.
Yeah.
And once that person reaches a certain status, just like that, they take them out of there. And I think that's done purposefully to remove all hope. So yeah, I'm so I agree with the notion that, don't don't let anybody pick and choose your leaders.
Yeah. I mean, especially not your oppressors. Your oppressors shouldn't be picking your leaders. Your oppressors should not have any hand or any say, any thought, any idea in who your leaders are. The grassroots leader versus the bourgeois leader, or the popular leader, the leader who is connected, the leader who has any connection to any sort of system, organization, or any entity within white supremacy. Those people should not be the leaders of the masses, because those people are compromised through their relationships and their proxy to white supremacy. Of course, those people want to be there. That's why they're there. That's why they have those positions. That's why they took those positions, because they're there. And so you have to ask yourself the question, if you don't trust white people, you're against white supremacy, you're against racism, you're against the government, all these things, why do you keep following the leaders that they give us through those systems that represent those systems?
Well, those are things that, when you think about the creation of the, right, not the Negro, but the
right.
When you think about those, the way that we were, our ancestors were programmed through the brutality of chattel slavery and the slave making plantations, like in Barbados, like in Louisiana, like in some of the other ports along the Caribbean. The obedience factor was beaten into us. And so, and it's funny, right? Because even in the conscious sectors, the Pan-African and Black nationalist sectors, you see this. You see that there's a rejection of the Most High, of God. And in lieu of that, we'll speak to our ancestors and things of that nature. But the God on earth that we still seem to be obedient to, that we submit to, is the white God that brought us to this country.
Yep.
And enslaved our ancestors who was already here. So that's when you're trained to operate like that, you're always going to take a backseat to white authority. And then not presumptively, but I've seen it in person, white people walk into a room of black folk and assume that they already have the authority to interject,
right,
to question the leadership.
We talk about this often.
Yeah, to assume the head of the table, or that they have access to the head of the table. And then what we normally see is the black folk in that group wanting to all of a sudden, they acquiesce and they want to be fair. Well, let's hear them out.
Right.
You never have that opportunity,
right,
there too.
But I go back to that Negro mindset. That's the importance of the Negro mindset and implanting that, because that people with the Negro mindset will always acquiesce to the white person who's around, or the white person that seems to be in charge, because it's like the adage, and I'm not gonna say this is for every hood, but I know hoods in this city. White people who look like they have authority are safer in the most violent hoods than the black people who are in those hoods, because they look like they have authority, because they associate that whiteness and that authority to punishment and consequences and all those things.
I got one better, Joe. Man, who we letting off the hook? In all black neighborhoods, all hoods, the hooders of the hoods. If you got a drug corner and somebody like me and you come up and say, hey man, we're about to do some business over here, there's going to be a conversation. It's not going to be so friendly. It's going to be adversarial. The next day, a white man can come in and say, hey, we're confiscating this land, this area. Y'all need to move. And they'll pack up and go. It won't be no fight back, no pushback or nothing.
Yeah.
So, I've seen the gangsters.
Mindset.
I didn't know how articulate gangsters were until they were talking to police. Sir, you're violating my rights, sir. I have never
It's that mindset.
I like you would have done that. You'd have done well in school. But okay.
Anybody, anybody with that mindset though will be fair, par for the course to just follow the leader that is given, because the leader is charismatic, or the leader looks like that they have that proximity to whiteness that those black folk want. So Pat, man, you already know what it is, man. Jump on up in here. What do you think about the conversation between Tariq and the gentleman, especially what they're talking about, Booker T. Washington, W.E.B. Du Bois, just those leaders who were perceived to be given to us, especially going into the clip of Dr. Clark talking about Booker T. Washington. But what's your overall thoughts of the conversation and our leaders? Because we talk of you the one really got us talking about the followership and how the faulty followership aids the faulty leadership, just encompassing all of that. Man, jump on in here.
Yeah, I think I agree with Tariq Nasheed's point of the dangers of being given leaders and the dangers of leadership in general. Like everything, there are dangers that come with everything. You know, everything has a list of pros and cons. As far as W.B. Du Bois and Booker T, like we've talked about that. We were talking about that earlier today. My personal view is I don't really have a problem with either ideology. I think the ideologies were speaking to different groups of people. And I think what was missing from those two groups was a third group that would, you know, channel communication between the two. But I think one of the challenges we face is in a society where we've been given leaders. One of the things that's missing that I, you know, like you said, Joe, I always harp on, is the failure of followership, like to really talk about and really educate people on what it means to actually be a follower, to really talk about the mechanisms of leadership, like why does a leader have this authority? Well, they have that authority because all of their followers have transferred all of their individual authority to this one person. So this one person now operates and moves as an aggregate of the group. But the group has to acquiesce for that. The group has to kind of allow that to happen. So, and therein lies the danger of it, because you can, like Tariq Nasheed is right, you can by proxy attack a group by destroying the leader.
Right.
He's 100% right in that. I think the part he doesn't talk about is the fact that leadership is, in fact, like we said, white people give us our leaders. They do. But leadership is not something that somebody can command. It's always a mantle that's given. It's just now we're wondering, like, who's determining who's giving what? Is it an internal thing or is it an external thing? Because PC is right on a couple of different levels, in my opinion, when he says we can't, you know, we don't know who the leaders are in these other communities. That's right on two fronts. So on one front, it's right because we don't have the authority or the power to select their leaders.
Right.
Like, we don't have the authority or the power to select the leaders in the white community. On another front, we're not in the white community, so we don't really know who their leaders are. we don't know. So that means it's very difficult for us to launch any sort of attack on any sort of white group because we don't know what. So therein lies another problem with the black community, is the transparency of the community. And that transparency exists because a lot of the core key mechanisms of the community are dictated to us instead of being decided by us. And so we run in, like when we start talking about leadership, we start running into all of these different things. A big problem that I have is the fact that, and this is one of the core attributes of poor leadership. We talk about this all the time. When you cut the head off a leader, there should be 4 or 5 other leaders spring up from that neck. Proper organizations are hydras. The only reason it might only have one head is because nobody's cut it off yet. But if you cut the head off of a properly run organization, you're making the problem worse.
Right.
So here's the lesson that we have to learn. How to actually be a leader. I think leadership is something that, as a community, like I think in an ideal world, and that's why I say, even with Tariq Nasheed, I fully understand and embrace the fact of him rejecting the mantle of leadership. But there is a level of truth that comes with the fact that that's not a mantle you get to reject. And we've seen that just in the way Tariq Nasheed is looked at. This man for years
since the beginning.
I'm not a leader. And black folk have said, yes, you are.
Right.
We don't care.
I was listening to one of his clips yesterday, matter of fact, and he was going back and forth with a lady who was like, you've positioned yourself as the leader of the FBA movement. Matter of fact, I've heard plenty of people tell him that, but yeah, you're correct with that. They don't care. If they like you, you they leader.
Right, but that's the human part of it. And a lot of the times when we talk about the black community, I feel like we're not really looking at us for who we really are and for the human component of being a black person. He benefits from leadership, and that tons of people listen to him, ascribe to his views and things of that nature.
Yeah.
Again, I 100% respect the fact that he's standing up, waving his arm, saying, I'm not nobody's
I don't have
leader.
no problem with it. I don't have no problem with it.
Don't follow me. Like, I'm good with all of it. But I think what the rest of us have to understand is leadership doesn't work like that. When people rock with you, when you say something that they vibe with, when you think on a level that they want to get to, and they see a lot of what they themselves in you, you'll become their leader, and that is not a choice that you get to make.